Hey guys, tonight we're heading straight into the boudoir of one of the most theatrical monarchs in history, King Louis XIV. But before you get the wrong idea, we're talking powdered wigs, velvet drapes, and the occasional egg yolk in your shampoo. Yes, really. You wake up not in a cozy studio apartment, but in the sprawling, overly ornamented bedchamber of Versailles. Light filters in through golden drapes heavy enough to crush a small goat, and somewhere far off, you hear the faint rustling of courtiers assembling, because your awakening isn't just a private moment. It's a full production. In fact, it's more like a red carpet event, except everyone's dressed in satin and half of them are carrying buckets. You're not even fully conscious yet, and already people are outside the door organizing who gets to watch you open your eyes. You, my friend, are the sun. Not metaphorically, the actual Sun King. And Versailles? It's your solar system. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slowly open your eyes. The ceiling above you is an oil painting, literally. Cherubs swirl around like it's the Sistine Chapel on steroids, but you barely notice. Because you're used to it. The rustle of silk and hushed whispers around you signal that your attendants are in place. You've been asleep, but they've been rehearsing this scene for hours. The grand lever is about to begin. Your bedroom smells faintly of rosewater, lavender sachets, and a hint of burnt wax from the dozen candles still flickering around the perimeter. And yes, candles. It's the 17th century. Electricity is still a lightning bolt away from discovery. The bed beneath you is not just furniture, it's a state asset. Engraved, gilded, and wide enough to sleep diagonally without ever touching the edges. Your head turns slightly on the embroidered pillow, and you hear it, a servant's breath catching. You've moved. The show can now begin. Someone, usually the premier valet, approaches first, bowing so deeply it's unclear if he's greeting you or practicing yoga. He checks your pulse with his eyes only. Are you still breathing? Yes. Good. You've survived the night. France may rejoice. A murmur goes through the room. Nobles shuffle forward slightly, each hoping to catch your first words. Maybe you'll say something profound. Maybe just do coffee. Whatever it is, it will be repeated in salons and echoed in letters across the continent by noon. But you don't speak yet. You stretch. Slowly. Like a cat that owns half of Europe. Which, to be fair, you kind of do. Out the window, Versailles begins to stir. The gardens, with their manicured hedges and unnervingly symmetrical fountains, glisten with morning dew. Somewhere a gardener is combing the gravel to make sure it crunches just right under the feet of the privileged. Yes, combing the gravel. That's a real job here. Meanwhile, you're still lying in bed, eyes half closed, listening to the scrape of shoes on marble and the occasional poorly muffled cough from a noble who didn't get enough sleep. You almost feel sorry for them. Almost. Then comes the fanfare, a subtle one. A nod. A gesture. And suddenly the heavy double doors open and your room floods with the sound of brocade rustling and shoes tapping. The courtiers have arrived. They are here to watch you get out of bed. And not because they're weird, well, not just that, but because this is politics. To be seen here, at your rising, is to be seen at the very center of power. You haven't even brushed your teeth and you've already held court. Historians still debate whether Louis genuinely loved this routine or simply weaponized it as social control. But one thing's for sure, no one in that room is there just to check in on your sleep schedule. Everyone wants something. A title. A contract. A sideways glance of favor. You, meanwhile, are just trying to remember if today is Velvet Monday or Gold-Trimmed Wednesday. Your body remains still, but your mind is already cycling through today's schedule. There will be ministers, war briefings, theatre rehearsals, a masked ball, possibly a fountain dedication. Maybe two. It's hard being absolute monarch and lifestyle icon. Your sheets are gently pulled back by gloved hands. Silk brushes against your skin. You do not shiver. Kings do not shiver. A valet leans in to whisper the weather forecast, which, at Versailles, is only relevant in terms of how it affects hat feathers. And as you prepare to sit up, carefully, majestically, as one does, someone begins to announce the names of everyone present. Every single one. Because protocol demands it. And you? You just nod slowly, taking in the morning like a god receiving homage. This is not just waking up. This is performance art. And the curtain has officially risen. You haven't spoken yet, and already your day is unfolding like a well-rehearsed opera. The courtiers stand silently, frozen in expectation. This is your kingdom, but also your stage. Every blink, every breath is measured, mirrored, and mythologized. A valet approaches. He carries not food, not water, nothing so ordinary, but the royal slippers. They are embroidered with gold thread, lined with ermine, and possibly more expensive than most country estates. You lower your feet slowly to the floor, and as they touch the slippers, the room lets out an imperceptible sigh. The monarch is mobile. You rise, not hurriedly, of course. Rising too quickly would be undignified. Instead, you move with the practiced grace of a man who's been watched getting out of bed since adolescence. This is not just waking. It is choreography. And today, as always, the audience is full. The grand lever is divided into stages. First comes the petit lever, a more intimate moment with just a dozen or so high-ranking officials, doctors, and barbers. Yes, barbers. Because at Versailles, your hairline is a matter of state interest. As you move toward the fauteuil, the armchair positioned precisely for the ritual, a servant whisks the sheets away. Another smooths the mattress. A third carries away your nightshirt with the kind of reverence normally reserved for sacred relics. And yet, despite the formality, there's a rhythm to it all. A ballet of bodies, each trained to perfection. No one bumps into anyone. No one speaks out of turn. You don't need to give instructions. Your preferences are known, your dislikes feared, and your habits memorized by more people than you can remember. As you lower yourself into the chair, a cushion is gently placed behind your back. The barber steps forward and bows, razor in hand, not to shave you yet, but simply to be seen and acknowledged. He will return later, once you are properly shirted and semi-fed. Enter the physicians. Their arrival is a moment of both ceremony and dread. The chief doctor approaches, his robes rustling like dry parchment. He clears his throat, loudly enough to be heard by the back rows, and begins the daily analysis. Your pulse is checked. Your complexion is observed. Someone peers at your tongue with the intensity of a man decoding a lost language. The diagnosis? Likely favorable. It usually is. After all, declaring the king unwell is not a career move. Still, they fuss. They suggest mild tonics, perhaps a bit of theriac, or a cordial of wormwood. You listen politely, nodding occasionally, even though you know you'll ignore most of it. Except for the wine part. That one always stays. Historians still debate whether these morning medical theatrics were taken seriously or simply part of the elaborate pageantry. Some argue they were sincere efforts to monitor the king's health, others say they were more about appearances, just another layer in the onion of royal spectacle. But what's undeniable is this: everyone in the room is watching you for signs. Not just of illness, but of favor, mood, and intention. Your brow furrows, and suddenly 3 dukes are rethinking their afternoon plans. You yawn, and someone begins crafting an entire poem on royal fatigue. Someone takes your hand. Not romantically, of course. Romance would require privacy, which hasn't existed for you since the age of 4. No, this is your valet, checking your fingers for signs of humors. He sniffs your wrist. You let him. You're not even fazed anymore. As you sit in contemplative silence, the next wave arrives. The nobles of the robe. High-ranking officials, administrators, and men of ink and taxes. They bow. You nod. Sometimes you say something like, "We shall discuss this at council," which is the 17th century version of "email me later." By now, there are over 30 people in your bedroom. Some are speaking in hushed tones about court gossip. Some are just standing there, basking in the aura of your proximity. One guy near the door is clearly hoping to be noticed. He wore his nicest sash. You allow your gaze to drift toward the window. Outside, the morning light plays across the grand facade of Versailles. The fountains sparkle like champagne, and you know someone has spent hours ensuring each jet of water arcs precisely the same height. Because perfection isn't accidental, it's staffed. Behind you, a servant appears with a basin. Not just any basin, mind you, this one is gilded, imported from Florence, and has its own name. You dip your fingers into the lukewarm water, dabbing your eyes and temples. A ritual cleansing, symbolic more than practical. The perfumes are next. Lavender. Orange blossom. A whiff of ambergris so rich it might as well be a down payment on a chateau. You are gently dabbed behind the ears, along the collarbone, and just below the wrists. One noble faints. Not from the scent, just from standing too long without eating. And as the final notes of citrus and musk settle around you like a scented fog, you take your first sip of water for the day. It's been filtered through linen, blessed by someone important, and poured from a carafe more ornate than most wedding cakes. You exhale. The room shifts slightly, as if the act of your breath has given everyone else permission to move again. There's a subtle murmur of satisfaction. The morning is proceeding well. No crises. No unexpected coughs. No visible pimples. You rise once more, signaling the end of the petty lever. Now it's time for the full cast to enter. You're standing now, which means a dozen people are moving at once, some stepping forward, others stepping back, all careful not to collide in the choreography of royal logistics. There's no clapping, but the collective energy in the room says, "Bravo, the king has risen." Enter the grand lever, the full audience. You may not be wearing trousers yet, but that's irrelevant, because at Versailles, decency is a matter of rank, not nudity. Dukes, bishops, ambassadors, and that one guy who keeps turning up despite not technically having a position, they all file in, forming a semicircle of powdered reverence around your divine morning form. You don't speak. Why would you? Your very presence is a monologue. Instead, you look mildly amused, which is the safest expression when 40 men are hanging on your every facial twitch like it's the latest papal decree. A nobleman steps forward to present you with something, usually a letter, a petition, sometimes a rare melon. You nod as if to say, "This melon is worthy of my empire," and hand it off to a valet whose job is essentially object handler to the stars. Your gaze drifts across the room and lands on a familiar face, Monsieur de Saint-Simon. He's always scribbling in his mental notebook, storing every raised eyebrow for future memoirs. You consider smiling at him just to mess with the historical record. Your undergarments are now ready. 2 servants approach with the linen drawers and shirt, both pre-warmed by sitting beside a brazier for the last hour. The shirt alone takes 4 people to put on, 2 to hold it, 1 to guide your arm, and 1 to narrate the process like it's a sacred ritual. Which, in a way, it is. Historians still debate whether this level of involvement in dressing was strategic, a way for Louis to exert soft power through ritual, or simply a byproduct of too much velvet and not enough zippers. Probably both. As the shirt settles over your shoulders, a ripple moves through the room. It's as though a holy relic has just been unveiled. Someone whispers a prayer. Someone else takes notes. You sneeze quietly. 3 people flinch. There's a sudden shuffling near the back. A courier has arrived with dispatches from the frontier, something about fortifications in Flanders. But he's made the mistake of entering too boldly, and now he's stuck in etiquette limbo, not important enough to speak, too visible to retreat. You spare him a quick glance of forgiveness. He may live. Meanwhile, the ceremonial chain is being brought forth. No, not the crown. Not yet. This is the mourning chain, slightly less gold, slightly more symbolic. It's placed around your neck by the Grand Chambellan, who looks like he hasn't blinked since you were 10. Someone coughs. Not discreetly. A scandal is born. You're now half-dressed and 100% regal. The morning's first spoken words emerge from your lips, and they are about shoes. Of course. Because nothing throws off the balance of divine kingship like wearing the wrong pair of heeled slippers. Today you opt for crimson velvet with a modest ruby clasp. Modest, meaning only some light blindness when viewed in direct sun. One of your ministers seizes the moment to whisper something about a treaty. You wave a hand gently, enough to indicate you've heard, not enough to promise any follow-up. It's a masterstroke of royal communication, vague but unforgettable. The courtiers observe this with fascination. One of them, a viscount from the provinces, is clearly trying to edge closer. His strategy involves pretending to admire the wall tapestries. You mentally give him a 6/10 for subtlety. The tapestries, by the way, are absurd. They depict scenes from your own life, a stylized version of your first hunt, your coronation, and one where you're defeating a hydra for some reason. Historical accuracy? Optional. At last, the robe. The robe du jour embroidered silk with a lining of white satin and gold trim. It has the approximate weight of a medium-sized dog and requires 2 footmen just to carry the train. As they approach, you raise your arms, and it's draped over you like the sky falling into place. Once again, someone murmurs about your glow. It's probably the candlelight reflecting off your high cheekbones and extreme authority, but who are you to argue? There's a quiet knock. A final addition to the morning audience. It's the Bishop of Meaux, here to deliver the briefest of blessings. You tolerate it with a bowed head and a flicker of boredom. Religion, after all, is important, but not more important than punctuality. As you're fastening the final clasp, someone adjusts your wig stand. Yes, you have an entire stand just for choosing which wig to wear, more on that later. For now, the priority is finishing your transformation from sleepy demigod to full-blown sun deity. Outside, bells are chiming. Not for mass, not for alarm. They chime for you. Because the king is awake, clothed, and mildly interested in the affairs of state. You turn slightly and gesture toward the breakfast salon. Time to walk. You take your first step toward the breakfast salon, and suddenly, your Moses parting a velvet sea of powdered wigs and courtly anxiety. Servants scurry forward to open doors that are already half open. Nobles step aside with perfectly timed bows, as if your mere movement reorients the gravitational pull of Versailles. Each footstep clicks gently against the marble, muffled by layers of fabric, dignity, and at least 2 inches of elevated heels. Yes, you're wearing high heels. They're red, in fact, because only the king is allowed to wear them at court. Everyone else? Flat-footed commoners, metaphorically speaking. The corridor is lined with mirrors, a design choice you approved yourself. You like the idea that every reflection shows your kingdom from another angle, plus, they help you check your posture without being obvious. Not that your posture ever falters. You're a living statue of control. The breakfast salon awaits, and though it's only a few doors down, the journey takes a good 5 minutes. Not because of distance, but because of pomp. Along the way, people bow. Some curtsy. One man drops a glove and dramatically retrieves it in what might be the most baroque version of flirting ever conceived. As you arrive at the table, it's clear that breakfast at Versailles is not a rushed affair. The table is set with surgical precision. Plates, cups, folded linen, and enough silverware to perform a minor operation. And all of it is facing you, like an altar to appetite. Your chair is drawn back by 2 footmen. You sit with the gravity of someone aware that this moment will be recorded in at least 3 journals and possibly a tapestry. A napkin is placed in your lap, not by your hand, of course, but by an attendant with the soft dexterity of someone who's done this 700 times and never once made eye contact. And now or the food. Let's start with the bread. It's not just any bread, it's a golden, crusty marvel from the royal bakery, made with wheat grown on a carefully curated patch of land that is literally called the King's Field. Even the flour has an ego. You break it gently, and the room collectively inhales. Batter appears, whipped to silk and flavored with something faintly citrus, maybe bergamot, maybe divine providence. Fruit is next. Sliced into perfect symmetry. Grapes that glisten like pearls, figs cut with the precision of a surgeon in love. There's a melon, chilled just enough to mist in the air, as though it too understands the importance of ambience. As you eat, you do not speak. Breakfast is sacred. This is not the time for war briefings or marriage proposals. This is the time for chewing with imperial elegance. Still, people watch. A small crowd stands just beyond the threshold, too low-ranking to enter, but important enough to be present. Some of them are keeping track of what you eat, as though it might reveal divine preferences. You take a bite of strawberry and somewhere, a kitchen boy is promoted. Suddenly, a whisper at your shoulder. It's your maître d'hôtel, here to inform you of the drink selection. There's milk from the royal cows, yes, they have names, and hot chocolate brought from the Spanish court. The chocolate is thick, velvety, and so rich that each sip feels like a personal gift from Montezuma. You choose it, naturally. As the cup is placed before you, you briefly catch your own reflection in a golden spoon. You look tired. Or maybe majestic. It's hard to tell at this hour. The chocolate coats your mouth like velvet dipped in candlelight. It's not just delicious, it's strategy. You know that somewhere in the palace, a foreign ambassador is eating dry toast and wondering how you remain so powerful. The answer: decadence, discipline, and maybe just a pinch of theatrical cocoa. Historians still argue whether these breakfasts were truly moments of rest for Louis, or yet another performance. But one thing is clear: you are always being watched. Even when you're sipping chocolate, your very existence is a lesson in diplomacy. A small commotion outside the salon draws your gaze. Someone, a noble from Brittany, if memory serves, has fainted from heat or hunger or sheer emotional overload. A valet rushes forward with smelling salts while another discreetly pulls the man away. You keep eating. This happens more than you'd think. More fruit is offered. This time, an apple, polished to such a shine it could be used to signal ships at sea. You decline with a subtle gesture. A servant bows and removes it like it was never there. Next comes the final bite, a sliver of cheese, aged in the royal cellar, served with a drizzle of honey from bees that reside in your private garden. The balance of salt and sweet reminds you, vaguely, of foreign policy. You set your fork down. Instantly, the room reacts. Someone lifts the plate. Someone else refolds the napkin. Another bows deeply, as if to say, "Thank you for consuming calories in our presence." You stand. No signal was needed, but a wave of coordinated motion follows. The chair disappears. The floor is swept. The air itself seems to adjust in deference to your digestion. As you exit the salon, your next ritual awaits, the selection of the day's attire. Not just fashion. Not just vanity. This is battle armor made of brocade and lace. And the decision could very well determine the course of European politics, or at least the gossip over dinner. The corridor leading from the breakfast salon to your dressing chamber is long, gilded, and entirely unnecessary, unless you're the kind of person who enjoys a short catwalk between courses. Fortunately, you are exactly that kind of person. Your heels click in a steady rhythm as courtiers part like the Red Sea, all careful to look vaguely in your direction without ever meeting your eye directly. It's an art form, really. The Versailles stare, 75% or 25% hope. You pause briefly near a window. The light filters in just so, catching the gold in your robe and throwing a divine glow across the parquet floor. You don't plan these moments, they just happen. Probably because the entire palace is designed to make you look magnificent at all times, even when contemplating breakfast indigestion. You reach the dressing chamber. Not a closet, not a wardrobe. A chamber. And within it waits a small army of stylists, tailors, wig masters, and what might be a military strategist disguised as a valet. The air is thick with the scent of starch, lavender, and the faint hum of tension. Because today, like every day, someone's future depends on whether you choose their recommendation. Embroidery has consequences. Waiting on padded stools are the fabric options, velvet, silk, brocade, and that strange material from Persia no one knows how to pronounce. The choices are pre-selected by your premier habilleur, who knows better than to present anything less than visually operatic. He steps forward now, arms crossed over a bolt of teal damask, and dares to speak. Majestic, might I propose a contrast to yesterday's crimson? You arch an eyebrow. Yesterday's crimson was a triumph. It matched the tulips in the East Garden and made at least 2 Spanish envoys question their wardrobes. Still, you nod. Let's see the alternatives. With the drama of a stage magician, bolts of fabric are unfurled in front of you, each one draping like liquid wealth. One has tiny fleur-de-lis embroidered in actual silver thread. Another was dyed with indigo so rare that a single stain would bankrupt a minor duchy. You approach, hands behind your back, considering. Behind you, the room waits. Silent. Breath held. Somewhere, a valet begins to sweat through his doublet. You reach out, and not to choose, but to touch. Texture matters. The way the fabric flows, resists, breathes. You run a hand along the silk and imagine how it will reflect candlelight later this evening when you host a minor ball for 400 people and pretend it's intimate. Then, decisively, you speak, the cobalt brocade. Gasps are muffled. The cobalt brocade it is. Immediately, a flurry of motion. The garment is laid out, inspected, pressed again, even though it was pressed 5 minutes ago, and handed reverently to the 2 attendants tasked with helping you into it. This, too, is a process. The shirt is adjusted. The cuffs aligned with near-military precision. The coat, heavy with embroidery, is eased onto your shoulders by men who lift it as if it's made of glass and possibly judgment. One wrong fold, and someone's uncle loses a title. As you're dressed, a valet murmurs updates from the outside world. The Queen is attending chapel. The Dauphin is asking again about falconry. A minor scandal involving the Duchess of Chartres and a mysterious poem left in a rosebush is being quietly contained. You listen without reacting. Your face is a canvas of serene authority. Internally, you're thinking, what kind of poem? Then comes the cravat. An absurdly complicated piece of fabric whose sole purpose is to strangle you slightly while making your neck look important. Today's cravat is made from lace imported from Bruges and pre-scented with a tincture of rosemary and something else. Possibly envy. A mirror is brought forward. not just any mirror. This one was commissioned from Venice, has no less than 87 individual facets, and reflects your image from 5 flattering angles. You gaze into it, tilting your head just enough to catch your profile. You look, what's the word, inevitable. Historians still debate whether Louis's obsession with mirrors and appearances was mere vanity or a calculated assertion of dominance. After all, when the king is the state, dressing becomes diplomacy. A wrinkle in your sleeve might as well be a weakness in your navy. At last, the wig. Or rather, the selection of wigs. There are over 400 in the royal collection, each styled, powdered, and categorized by occasion. Today, your maître perruquier, yes, your wig master, has narrowed the options to 3. Option 1, the audience cascade, featuring cascading curls that rest just above the shoulder. Option 2, the hunting flow, a looser wave with a rakish tieback, ideal for outdoor visibility and casual intimidation. Option 3, the ceremonial flood, an opulent manet that could double as insulation for a moderately sized chateau. You point. The ceremonial flood it is. 2 attendants lift it with synchronized bows and ease it onto your head like it's a crown made of hair. Powdered slightly with white rice flour and scented with jasmine, it completes your transformation from merely majestic to mythological. You turn in place once. Slowly. The mirror agrees, perfection. As the final accessory, a sapphire ring the size of a walnut is slipped onto your finger. A butler enters the chamber. The council awaits, Your Majesty. You nod. Outside, Versailles glitters. Inside, you are now fully assembled. Time to rule. The door to the council chamber looms ahead, tall enough to remind everyone that humility is optional when you're anointed by God. As you approach, 2 liveried guards open it with synchronized precision, revealing a room that smells faintly of candle wax, ink, and quiet ambition. Inside, your ministers are already assembled. They've been waiting, of course they've been waiting. That's part of the experience. Louis XIV doesn't enter a room. He redefines it. The room is arranged just so, long wooden table, chairs carved with lion's paws, and stacks of parchment strategically placed to suggest business. You don't sit immediately. First, you glide. Slowly. Let the silence soak. Let the air shift. Finally, you settle into your seat, the only one with red velvet upholstery and a gilded backrest shaped like a sunburst. Naturally. To your left, the Minister of War clears his throat. To your right, the Controller General fidgets with a wax seal. They are ready to speak, but they won't until you give a nod. Even a small one. Especially a small one. It's more powerful that way. You nod. The reports begin. Taxes are up in the provinces, though there's some unrest in Languedoc over salt tariffs. The Navy's dry docks are behind schedule. Someone in Marseille tried to bribe an inspector with a wheel of cheese. You feign surprise, then offer a faint smirk. Bribery is an art, the real offense is clumsiness. You ask a question, sharp, unexpected. The room tightens. A younger advisor stammers. You don't scold him. You merely raise an eyebrow, which in court terms is equivalent to being struck with a thunderbolt. You won't sleep tonight. Behind you, the windows are open just a crack, letting in the scent of Versailles lemon groves. A breeze flutters a few pages of parchment. You reach out and smooth them down with a fingertip ringed in sapphire. The motion is deliberate. The message, I control everything. Even the wind. Historians still discuss the structure of your councils. Some argue you were merely a figurehead surrounded by powerful ministers. Others insist you orchestrated every decision like a master puppeteer in silk gloves. Either way, no one doubted that when you were in the room belonged to you. A heated exchange begins about troop placements near the Spanish border. You let it play out for a moment, like a cat watching mice argue over cheese. Then you interject, softly. 2 words. Maybe 3. Enough to redirect the entire conversation. One minister nods as if you've just quoted Cicero. Another pretends it was their idea all along. A third begins furiously taking notes, unsure what just happened but certain it was brilliant. You don't even break eye contact. Someone brings up the court budget. You wave it away. That's a problem for tomorrow. Or never? Versailles will be lavish until the world runs out of marble and powdered sugar. The meeting continues for another half hour, but you're only half listening now. Your mind drifts. You're thinking about the opera tonight. And your costume. And whether the Queen will try to talk to you again about the Dauphin's emotional development. Spoiler, you're not interested. A servant arrives at the door, bows deeply, and announces that your midday walk is ready. Yes, announced. Even your strolls have trailers. You rise. The ministers stand with you, though some are slow, stiff from age or anxiety. You pause, letting them catch up, before giving a graceful nod and gliding toward the exit. As you leave the chamber, a noblewoman in the hallway lowers her gaze, then looks up just enough to see your face. The faintest curve of her mouth suggests intrigue. You pretend not to notice. You absolutely noticed. The hall outside is different now, buzzing with new rumors born from your expressions during council. Did you see how he looked when Colbert mentioned the ports? Someone whispers. That was the look, another replies, as if decoding a sacred text. You pass a decorative bust of yourself and don't even glance at it. Why would you? You're already doing a better job at being you than marble ever could. The midday walk begins in the orangery. Versailles gardens are more manicured than a royal pedigree. Rows of citrus trees stand in silent salute, their leaves trembling in the breeze like fanboys at a rock concert. Gravel crunches under your heels, perfectly raked gravel, of course. There's someone whose full-time job is gravel raker. 2 spaniels trot beside you. Not yours, technically, but they seem to understand your aura. A gardener bows as you pass, holding a pair of shears and a slightly terrified expression. You pause near the Fountain of Apollo, your personal favorite. It depicts the sun god rising from the sea, flanked by horses, dolphins, and at least one very intense merman. The water sparkles. You admire it for a beat too long. Somewhere behind you, a scribe is noting it down. The king is in a contemplative mood. You don't speak during your walk, but your silence says everything. This kingdom is beautiful. And I made it so. A faint laugh escapes from a nearby hedge maze. Someone's child, perhaps. You smile, almost imperceptibly. A courtier spots it and immediately plans to commission a tapestry of this exact moment. As you near the end of your walk, a footman appears with a small parasol, not because you need it, but because it's part of the look. You return to the palace, stepping back into shadowed marble corridors. Inside, the air is cooler, scented with beeswax and rosewater. Outside, the sun continues its arc across the sky. But inside these walls, it follows you. You step back inside the palace, the temperature shifting subtly, like the walls are exhaling in your presence. Marble cools beneath your heels, muffling your footsteps slightly, though not enough to diminish their importance. Everywhere you go, the air adjusts, as if Versailles itself is alive and knows its king has returned. You're halfway between the orangery and your next obligation when you decide, on a whim, to take the long way back. This minor deviation will delay no more than 5 minutes, but it throws the entire court into quiet panic. Chamberlains whisper. Pages shuffle papers that don't need shuffling. Someone sprints to alert the next room that the king may arrive from the wrong direction. Let them worry. You are admiring the walls. Because these aren't just walls. They are statements. Gilded panels, murals that defy scale, cherubs doing questionable things with ribbons and fruit. And mirrors, so many mirrors. Versailles has more mirrors than some cities have windows. You glance at your reflection, casually, just to make sure you're still radiating monarchy. You are. As you walk, you hear distant music. A trio of musicians is rehearsing in one of the salons. A violin hits a slightly sour note. You don't flinch, but a passing steward does. He will probably write a 5-paragraph apology later. About a violin that you barely noticed. You pass the gallery of battles. 46 massive paintings depicting military triumphs, some of which are only loosely connected to actual victories. No one really minds. At Versailles, perception is reality, and your armies are always winning, even when they're not. Ahead, your maître d'honneur greets you with a deep bow. Majestic, he says, gesturing toward the Salon de l'Abondance. A midday refreshment has been arranged. Technically, you didn't request it, but then again, you never have to. The palace anticipates you. Like a well-trained but deeply anxious butler. You enter. The salon is aglow with natural light bouncing off golden cornices and crystal chandeliers. A side table is set with trays of delicacies, candied fruits, sugared almonds, a loaf of brioche so pillowy it looks like it dreams of being touched. And wine, because why not? Even the water here is suspiciously luxurious. You take a seat, not just anywhere, but in a fauteuil once designed for Marie de Medici and slightly modified to accommodate your royal posture. A servant rushes forward with a lemon cloth to dab the arms of the chair. He's a bit too enthusiastic. You raise a brow. He vanishes. You sip from a delicate glass etched with your initials and adorned with a single grape motif. The wine is from Burgundy, of course. The good vineyard. The one where grapes are apparently serenaded nightly by lute players. As you taste it, your gaze drifts out the window. The fountains are active again. The central one, Latona's fountain, is spewing water like it's trying to win a contest. Sculpted frogs and turtles appear to leap from the marble in praise of you. Historians often ask, did Louis XIV ever tire of grandeur? It's a fair question. But in moments like this, wine in hand, sunlight gilding your fingers, the very palace holding its breath, you understand that the real answer is no. Because the grandeur is the point. A footman clears his throat softly, an artful blend of announcement and apology. The Queen has requested your presence. Ah. You smile, mildly. This is not unexpected. Nor is it unwelcome. Marie-Therese is patient, devout, and entirely aware that her role is mostly ceremonial. Still, these little visits keep the court whispering, and you don't mind letting the world wonder about the private life of a public god. You rise. The glass is removed before you finish placing it down. The napkin disappears mid-lift. A door is opened precisely 1.2 seconds before you reach it. You never break stride. The Queen's apartments are quieter than yours. Less gold. More devotional paintings. Fewer mirrors. She prefers modesty, which at Versailles means only a little ostentation instead of unrelenting magnificence. You enter without knocking. Of course you do. She stands, curtsies slightly, and smiles. There is a kind of worn affection in her eyes, the look of a woman who understands that she married an institution, not a man. You exchange pleasantries. You compliment her embroidery. You ask after the Dauphin. You don't mention the Duchess of Chartres or the scandal in Erosebush. That's for other rooms, other shadows. She asks if you'll join her at Vespers tonight. You say perhaps. Which, in royal language, means, I probably won't, but I like that you asked. After 10 polite minutes, you make your exit, leaving behind the scent of amber and absolution. Back in the hallway, your chief steward awaits with the afternoon itinerary. You scan the list. A diplomatic reception. A theatre rehearsal. A brief audience with a Dutch painter. Oh, and a wine tasting in the East Pavilion. That one you underlined yourself. You begin walking again, and the palace breathes with you. Doors open, carpets flatten, people arrange themselves like chess pieces trying not to be pawns. You're not late. You never are. Time waits for you. And as you make your way to the next spectacle, someone whispers, "He looks especially radiant today." Of course you do. You're Louis XIV. And your day has only just begun. You're halfway down the corridor to the salon of diplomacy when you pause, not for dramatic effect, though that's a pleasant side benefit, but because you notice a draft. A slight one. Barely there. But in Versailles, even a breeze has politics. You glance toward the tall window. The curtain flutters like it's trying to warn you of something, here perhaps an ambassador arriving early, or a soufflé collapsing in the royal kitchens. A nearby servant sees the flutter and blanches. He's already preparing an apology letter to your tailor, just in case the wind mussed a single pleat in your sleeve. You continue walking. Ahead, the double doors of the diplomatic salon open with a solemn groan that someone probably spent 3 weeks rehearsing. Inside, the light is dimmer, the energy more coiled. Diplomats from Spain, England, the Holy Roman Empire, all here, waiting, shifting ever so slightly in their stiff collars and cultural inferiority. They rise as you enter. You don't rush. You let your presence settle over the room like incense. Eyes widen. Brows lower. One ambassador murmurs something to another, who nods as if just witnessing your entrance has solved a minor border dispute. The translator steps forward, but you lift a hand. You prefer to listen first, not to the words, but to the tone. It's one of your many gifts. That, and making grown men sweat through 3 layers of velvet simply by adjusting your stance. The Spanish ambassador bows and presents a small chest. A gift from Madrid, he says. You raise a single brow. Inside is a lace fan. Delicate. Hand-stitched. Possibly too symbolic. You accept it with a small nod and hand it off without looking. The fan's destiny now belongs to someone in your gift-tracking bureaucracy. Next comes the Englishman, all teeth and apologies. He talks trade routes and tariffs, but mostly he tries to look humble. You glance at him briefly and then, without blinking, ask, "And how is the weather in London this week?" He stammers. Because in Versailles, a weather question is never just about the weather. Historians still debate whether Louis truly enjoyed diplomacy or merely endured it as an opportunity to demonstrate aesthetic superiority. There's evidence for both. What's clear is that while other leaders negotiated in war rooms, you negotiated in salons, with art, atmosphere, and upholstery doing half the work. You move to the next representative, from the Dutch Republic. He's brought a painting. Naturally. You study it. A windmill, a cow, and a suspiciously cloud-heavy sky. You nod, not because you like it, but because you enjoy making people think they've pleased you. The painter himself waits nearby, sweating profusely and holding a brush like it's a talisman. He looks like he might faint. You turn to him and say, "Perhaps a portrait of the gardens next time." He almost collapses from joy. At Versailles, even vague suggestions are prophecy. You listen to a few more petitions, grant 2 meaningless titles, and refuse one request with a silence so cold it should be listed on the royal weather report. Then you stand. Immediately, the salon stirs. People rise, shuffle, bow, try not to trip over their own reverence. You exit without a word. Everything that needed to be said was already felt. In the corridor, you breathe more freely. Not because you're tired, but because diplomacy smells faintly of tension and overcooked linen. You make your way toward the East Pavilion, where the wine tasting awaits, a rare event where you are the audience. The room is airy and sun-drenched, with windows overlooking a stretch of manicured lawn so precisely trimmed it could serve as a chessboard for giants. A long table is prepared, glinting with crystal decanters and carafes labeled in elegant script. 3 sommeliers stand to attention. They know better than to speak first. You seat yourself, resting one arm on the velvet-lined table, and gesture. The first wine is poured. A Burgundy, dark and slow-moving. You swirl it. You don't sniff, too performative. You taste. And immediately, you raise one brow half a millimeter. The sommelier flinches. Too forward, he asks. You don't answer. Next comes a lighter vintage. A Loire Valley white, crisp, floral, and distinctly less arrogant than the first. You sip. Then, casually, you say, acceptable. The room exhales. The third is from Bordeaux. Promising. Deep. Complex. You take a moment, savoring. Then you place the glass down and simply state, serve this at tonight's dinner. That's all it takes. That wine is now legend. Behind you, someone tries to enter, late. You glance sideways, and just like that, the doors close again. Late is unacceptable. Even if it's only by 3 seconds. Especially if it's only by 3 seconds. You rise and leave without finishing the final glass. It's not a dismissal. It's an opportunity for them to wonder what it would have tasted like. Outside the pavilion, the sun is still high. Shadows fall across the gardens in neat rows, as if even the light dares not displease you. You stroll toward the Hall of Mirrors, not for any official reason, but because sometimes you just like to walk among 357 reflections of yourself. And who could blame you? Inside, the mirrors catch your image from every angle. Every curl of your wig, every seam of embroidery, every smirk that might be mistaken for divine inspiration. You stop in the center and turn slowly. Not admiring. Just confirming. The hall was built to dazzle foreign dignitaries, and it does that. But it also serves another purpose. It reminds you who you are. The king of reflections. The monarch of all angles. And as you walk through the glittering gallery, you hear your own footsteps echoing back at you, multiplied by 1,000 panes of glass. It sounds like history. You exit the Hall of Mirrors like a comet exiting the sky, brilliant, deliberate, and followed by the low hum of whispers. Behind you, the reflections continue to shimmer, capturing the afterimage of a monarch in motion. Even your absence leaves an impression. Now, the afternoon court begins. Not officially, of course, nothing in Versailles ever just happens. It's scheduled, layered, and draped in silk. Today's gathering is in the Salon de Mars, a room named for the god of war but used mostly for gossip and calculated social advancement. Very on brand, really. You enter to a flurry of subtle motion. Fans flutter. Perfumed handkerchiefs appear. Someone coughs, discreetly, interlace. All eyes, as always, turn to you. You take your place beneath a massive portrait of, you guessed it, you, painted in full armor, astride a horse that somehow looks less regal than you do. The salon fills with courtiers and nobles of varying degrees of relevance. Some are here because they hold titles. Others because they hold stories. A few are here simply because they're married to the right mistakes. You sit, and immediately, the chatter begins. A duchess leans in to compliment your choice of brocade. A marquis sidles up with a rumor wrapped in flattery. A poet reads the room and wisely stays silent. You nod, smile faintly, and respond only when necessary, which is to say, when your silence might be mistaken for apathy. The conversation drifts to the latest scandal, a misplaced letter, a misjudged glance, a midnight rendezvous gone slightly too public. You listen without comment, but later, a word or two from you will determine whose reputation survives and whose doesn't. A young nobleman approaches, nervously holding a small manuscript. He bows deeply, offering it with trembling hands. You take it, carefully. It's a play, of course. Everyone at Versailles is either writing a play, starring in one, or living as if they are. You skim the first few lines, then hand it off to your valet with a casual, "We'll see." You won't. But it was kind to pretend. Historians still debate how much influence these court salons truly had on policy. Some claim they were distractions from the real work of governance. Others argue that everything of consequence in France began not in chambers, but in whispers beneath chandeliers. They're both right. You stand. Which means everyone else does, too, though slightly slower, as if not to challenge your pacing. You exit the salon, your presence lingering like a perfume no one can afford. The corridor beyond leads to your private gallery, a long, vaulted space lined with artwork and busts of Roman emperors you vaguely respect. It's not open to the general court, which makes it one of the few places in the palace where you can walk alone, or as alone as one can be when followed by 6 attendants and a notary with perfect penmanship. You pause before a painting of Alexander the Great. Not because you're comparing yourself, okay, maybe a little, but because you're wondering if his armor was really that shiny or if history just added a filter. You like the idea of future portraits giving you that kind of polish. A servant approaches and whispers the afternoon itinerary. Theatre rehearsal in the private opera house. A brief sit for a portrait. A surprise visit from your cousin, who is never actually a surprise and always just passing through with an entourage of 48. You sigh softly. Not out of boredom, but out of abundance. There's simply too much magnificence to manage. The opera rehearsal begins in the Grand Theatre, a jewel box of velvet and gold. You take your seat in the royal box, centered, elevated, and discreetly warmed. Below, the actors bow as a group. The composer nervously taps his baton against a music stand that costs more than a townhouse. The rehearsal is fine. The soprano is slightly flat. The tenor is slightly smug. You listen with the face of someone weighing matters of state. Occasionally, you tap your finger to the rhythm. That alone is enough to send half the cast into overdrive. Someone misses a cue. You tilt your head. The conductor sweats through his wig. After 40 minutes, you rise. The rehearsal ends instantly. There's no formal signal, just your absence, which is signal enough. You return to your quarters. Your valet is waiting with a fresh change of clothes, this time, a lighter ensemble, better suited for twilight. Powder is reapplied, lace adjusted, and your hair refluffed with a silver comb that has your initials engraved in a font only 3 people on earth can read. Outside, the gardens are beginning to glow. Candles in glass lanterns line the pathways, and the scent of jasmine drifts in from the hedges. It's nearly time for the evening promenade. But first, just a moment, you sit. Alone. Almost. You glance at the evening light crawling across the marble floor. You stretch your legs, rest your hand on the velvet armrest, and breathe. Not for anyone else. Not for theatre or diplomacy. Just for you. And still, it's perfect. Because even when no one is watching, Louis XIV performs. The sun is beginning to bow out, casting long shadows across the palace grounds. That golden hour glow, faint, warm, and impossibly flattering, floods the corridors of Versailles. Naturally, it looks best on you. Not that you planned it. The sun simply knows its place in the order of things. It's time for the evening promenade. This isn't just a walk. Nothing is ever just something at Versailles. This is a slow-moving display of grace, power, fashion, and subtle rivalry, all under the watchful gaze of statues who, frankly, envy your wig. You emerge onto the terrace, the breeze curling around your shoulders like a silk shawl spun from admiration. Below, the royal gardens stretch outward in perfect geometry, man's triumph over chaos, nature rearranged into obedience. Just like your court. A small ensemble begins to play. Not too loudly. You hate when the violins compete with the sound of your heels on stone. A select group of nobles joins the walk, invited, of course. Access is everything. You're not simply the King of France, you're the gatekeeper to proximity. Every step with you is a rung on the ladder of influence. And they know it. You walk slowly. Each footstep is measured, each gesture considered. You nod at a countess whose dress is a little too inspired by last week's mistress. You glance at a marquis who has the audacity to wear green, your color, without permission. You make a mental note. Subtle punishment will follow. Perhaps a seating downgrade. Or a sudden absence of invitations. You pause at the fountain of Neptune, letting the sound of water do the talking for a moment. The courtiers linger behind you, like a painter's background figures, elegant, blurred, and desperate to be seen. One noble catches your eye and dares to offer a compliment. Your Majesty's step this evening, it rivals the gods. You give a slow, amused smile. He'll dine well for the next week. From across the garden, the Queen is visible in her own procession. Fewer people. More piety. Less sparkle. You incline your head ever so slightly in acknowledgement. She returns the gesture with polite distance. It's a public marriage, after all. The performance matters more than the plot. As you move through the groves, carefully manicured pathways bordered by hedges cut straighter than most moral compasses, you allow your hand to brush a flowering branch. The scent is divine, but you don't need to comment. Versailles is filled with such things because you're here. If you didn't exist, it would all wilt out of disappointment. Historians often puzzle over these promenades. Were they genuine relaxation or performative rituals of control? Again, it's both. You relax through performance. You breathe most freely when others are holding theirs, waiting to follow your lead. You arrive at the Grand Canal. Boats glide silently across the water, lit with lanterns, their sails trimmed like cork coats. Some carry musicians, others wine, and at least one contains a philosopher who doesn't realize he's here to be decorative. You sit on a carved bench facing the water. Two spaniels curl at your feet, knowing their place. A servant hands you a chilled goblet, just water, this time. But chilled perfectly. Because room temperature water is for people with unpowdered wigs. As twilight deepens, the promenade naturally dissolves. Nobles scatter to dinners, games, or covert exchanges behind hedges. You remain, staring at the water, letting your reflection blur and stretch with the ripples. You consider, for a moment, how this looks from afar, the King of France, alone, serene, backlit by the fading sun. It's a good image. You rise. Back inside, the palace is shifting into night mode. Candles are being lit. Curtains drawn. Music begins to drift from distant rooms like perfume carried on wind. Your evening meal is being prepared. You make your way toward the apartments, your pace unhurried. The halls are quieter now, but still alive. Everywhere, people adjust themselves based on where they believe you are at this moment. Your maître d'hôtel meets you with a report: roast pheasant, buttered asparagus, a citrus tart, and that one rare cheese imported at significant cost from an alpine village where the cows eat only thyme and listen to flute music. You nod. Dinner will be in the Petite Gallery. A smaller space, meaning only a few dozen observers. It's intimate by Versailles standards, which means enough silverware to arm a regiment and seating arrangements more sensitive than international treaties. You're dressed anew, of course. Something darker. Something that says, the sun may have set, but I have not. You dine. Slowly. Gracefully. A fork lift here, a dab of napkin there. You speak little, but your expressions do enough work to earn titles. A raised brow signals approval. A smile, rare, valuable, can validate an entire family's existence. Someone tries to make a joke about the Spanish ambassador's toupee. You offer a single chuckle. They'll brag about it for weeks. Historians argue about your dinners. Some say they were lonely affairs of public isolation. Others call them elaborate power plays. The truth is simpler, they were your stage. And you, always, the headline act. As the final course is cleared and the candles begin to drip more wax than light, you stand. The evening is not over, but your part in it, for now, is complete. There will be games. Music. Private visits. Public disappearances. But you? You will retreat to your chambers. Not to rest. To prepare. Because tomorrow, the sun rises again. And so do you. Your chambers await you, as do the 37 servants who will help you undress. It begins, like most things at Versailles, with a signal. A subtle turn of the shoulder. A tilt of the head. Immediately, the room adjusts. Lights dim, the chatter outside your doors fades, and the atmosphere thickens with candlelight and ceremony. You enter the royal bedchamber, a room grand enough to house a minor duchy and still have space for interpretive dance. At the center, your bed, a literal state monument. Carved, gilded, draped, and twice the height of most humans. It's both furniture and propaganda. A reminder that even in sleep, you dominate. A valet approaches with your nightshirt. Not just any nightshirt, mind you. This is a garment made from linen so fine it's rumored to whisper in Latin. Embroidered at the cuffs with your personal insignia, it's been pre-warmed at the fireplace and scented with a subtle blend of almond and reverence. You raise your arms. And that's when the ballet begins. One servant unties your cravat, gently, reverently, as though unwrapping sacred scrolls. Another removes your waistcoat, careful not to disturb the folds in your shirt beneath. A third collects the pins from your sleeves, counting each one aloud to ensure nothing goes missing. Losing a pin at Versailles is like losing a duel, only with more paperwork. Meanwhile, 2 more valets hover with towels, in case perspiration is detected. It usually isn't. You're too composed for that. Historians still debate the purpose of such an elaborate disrobing ritual. Was it really necessary to have nearly 40 people witness your transition from royal daywear to sleepwear? Perhaps not. But necessity is for peasants. You? You have symbolism. As your shoes are removed, each by a different man, because why not, you glance around the room. Paintings of mythological figures line the walls. Hercules. Apollo. Mars. You, in good company. And in one particularly bold portrait, you dressed as all 3 at once. Modesty? Charming concept. The wig comes off last. Carefully lifted, powdered down, brushed, and returned to its stand like a trophy. Beneath it, your hair is neatly tied and still resists gravity, much like your authority. Someone offers you slippers. You decline. Tonight, you'll go barefoot. Let them talk. A servant steps forward with the evening report, a scroll listing everything from births in the provinces to the weather in Brittany. You skim it. A nobleman's orchard has caught fire. A bishop is retiring. A poet has written 78 lines comparing your profile to the Arc de Triomphe. You pause. Only 78, you murmur. The room chuckles, carefully. Next comes the physician. Yes, again. He reappears, as he does every night, to confirm that your pulse still exists, your skin is still luminous, and your mood is fit for a restful sleep. He offers a tonic. You sip. It tastes like honey and paranoia. Then, finally, the formal coucher du roi, the ceremonial act of going to bed. Your royal family enters, those permitted, anyway, and stands at the foot of the bed. Nobles file in, depending on their rank, status, and how recently they've complimented your calves. They watch, in silence, as your bed curtains are drawn open. You ascend. One foot, then the other. You sit first, with grace, then lean back against the embroidered pillows. The sheets are cool, the linen crisp. A valet adjusts your position by exactly 1 inch. Another fluffs the pillow you didn't touch, because symmetry matters. The curtains remain open just long enough for a final gaze. You nod. They bow. The curtains close. And now, for the only moment of the day where you're not seen. Or so it seems. Outside the bed curtains, the chamber continues. Some linger, discussing your schedule. Others pretend not to listen. A select few leave, already composing letters about how serene you looked, or how your right eye closed half a second before you left. You hear none of this. Or perhaps you do. But you're resting now. Allegedly. Because even in sleep, you are Louis XIV. And even dreams must follow protocol. The palace has quieted now. Not fallen silent, Versailles never truly sleeps, but quieted, like an orchestra resting between movements. Distant footsteps echo down marbled corridors. A harpsichord plays faintly from some salon where wine has overpowered the clock. The moon has begun its shift over the gardens, painting silver ribbons across the Grand Canal. Inside your bedchamber, it's dim. Peaceful. The thick velvet curtains muffling both light and sound. You lie there, still as marble, encased in linen and ceremony, while the world continues to orbit you. But your day, technically, has not ended. You stir slightly. Not enough to ruffle a sheet, but enough for someone nearby to lean forward in the dark. Just in case. Because on certain nights, even after the coucher du roi, there is an encore. A knock, soft, calculated, almost apologetic. It's not entirely unexpected. A favored courtier enters, led by a servant who doesn't make eye contact. The visitor bows low, murmurs something rehearsed, and waits for your response. You say nothing at first. You let silence weigh. A tool, a weapon, a performance enhancer. Eventually, you nod. The guest approaches your bedside and kneels. Not for affection, not even necessarily for favor, though that's always a factor, but for the moment. To be here, beside you, in the sacred echo of day's end, is to touch the fringe of immortality. You speak briefly, questions, observations, a compliment with edges. You say little, but it's more than enough. Your words will be carried into dreams, dissected at breakfast, turned into rumors by noon. You know this. You count on it. The courtier departs, and once again, you are alone. Mostly. Because someone always remains just outside the curtains, listening for breath, for movement, for anything that might require service. You find this oddly comforting. Solitude is dangerous. Observation is order. You shift your thoughts toward tomorrow. The theatre performance. The ambassador's son. The matter of the naval officers who've been wearing hats slightly too tall, an offense so subtle it deserves poetic punishment. And then, of course, the hunt. You haven't decided yet whether you'll attend the hunt. But knowing you might is enough to send a dozen men into panic about saddle polish and feather placement. Historians still wonder how you managed it all. The pace. The scrutiny. The constant turning of yourself into spectacle. Some say it must have been exhausting. Others believe you thrived on it. The truth lies somewhere in the space between your sighs and your smirks. A candle flickers on a side table, burning lower now. The scent is beeswax and lavender. You remember approving that combination. Not too sweet, not too rustic. Appropriate. Controlled. You glance at the ceiling, hand-painted, of course. A swirl of clouds and deities, each one subtly gazing toward your side of the room. You chose that, too. Even the gods at Versailles look at you. There's a rustle of fabric near your feet. One of the dogs has climbed closer, curling up against the warmth of your presence. You allow it. It's been a long day, even for royalty. Especially for royalty. And yet, you are not tired. Not in the way ordinary people are. You're simply paused. The sheets are still crisp. The pillow, supportive. The entire room feels like it was designed for this single act, you drifting slowly towards sleep, while France remains suspended, waiting for your next breath. You let your eyes close. Only partly. Because even now, in the quiet core of midnight, with the world wrapped in velvet and moonlight, you are still Louis XIV. And you never truly go off stage. The palace outside your chamber shifts into its nocturnal rhythm, a different sort of performance, but one still very much choreographed. Candles are extinguished with practiced precision. Coals are stirred to glowing silence. Hallways echo with softer steps now, slippered and slow, as Versailles settles into the illusion of sleep. But you, the axis around which all of this turns, remain half awake. There's something about nighttime at Versailles. It's not truly dark, light lingers here, as if reluctant to leave you. Reflected moonlight bounces off marble floors. Gilt frames catch the glint of dying firelight. Even the shadows feel polished. A distant bell chimes. Not for time, it's far too late for schedules, but for ritual. The Queen's final prayers, perhaps. Or a monk lighting incense in the royal chapel. Whatever it is, it continues without you, as it should. You've already done enough. But in this hour, this deep, velvet hour, you begin to think differently. Not publicly, of course. Never aloud. But in the solitude of sheets and silence, your thoughts are allowed to stretch their legs. You think about your father. The throne you inherited so young. The years you spent hiding during civil unrest, clutching whispers of power but never quite safe. Those memories, though distant, still breathe beneath the gold and grandeur. They shaped you. Hardened you. Made you understand that to be seen is to be safe. That visibility, performed and perfected, became your armor. You shift slightly. A servant, stationed discreetly beyond the curtain, hears the motion and leans forward, just in case. Always ready. Always watching. Your mind drifts again, this time to legacy. What will they say of you? That you were too extravagant? That Versailles was excess gilded in denial? Or will they call you visionary? Builder of empires, patron of the arts, tamer of nobility? You hope it's both. Historians argue about your motives. Was the ritual about control or confidence? Was your obsession with image a shield or a mirror? The truth is simpler, more human. You know that power is theater. And you were born to be its lead actor. A breeze slips through a high window, carrying the faint scent of roses. They were freshly trimmed today, by royal command, of course. You had noticed a single wilted bloom yesterday, and by noon, an entire section of the garden had been quietly replanted. Even nature must obey. Your thoughts meander further, softening with the hour. You recall the laughter at this morning's council, the powdered smirk of the Spanish envoy, the way the sunlight caught the crystals in the hall of mirrors and fractured your reflection into infinity. You remember the warmth of the wine, the chill of the silver spoon, the whisper of brocade as you moved. Every moment curated. Every detail yours. And yet, here you are. Lying still, listening to the tick of the mechanical clock in the far corner of your room, its chime too gentle to wake anyone, too precise not to be noticed by you. You finally close your eyes completely now. Not because you are tired, but because the day is satisfied. You've done what you always do, ruled, enchanted, endured. You've kept the sun aloft with nothing but a raised eyebrow and an impeccable sense of timing. The palace breathes with you. Somewhere below, a page turns in a journal. A footman snores lightly outside your door. A marble bust of Caesar watches over you, less impressive by comparison. And above, the ceiling gods still gaze down. Not protectively, but respectfully. Because even they know, in this kingdom of mirrors and masks, there is only one true constant. You. Louis XIV. The man who made waking up a ceremony and going to bed a coronation. Morning comes early at Versailles, but not for you. Not yet. The palace begins its slow stretch into wakefulness long before your curtains are drawn. Servants shuffle through corridors with buckets of warm water. Chamberlains whisper schedules behind closed doors. Gardeners rake gravel into perfectly combed lines, as if arranging nature's hair for an audience with its king. The kitchen roars to life with the quiet thunder of copper pans and fresh cream. Even the fireplaces are instructed to crackle at a volume appropriate for morning regality. And still, you sleep. Or at least, you rest. Because true sleep, unguarded, unburdened, hasn't visited you in years. Not since boyhood. Not since the first time you realized that a kingdom could fall in the space between dreams. Your body lies still beneath layers of linen and protocol, but your mind is already stirring, mapping the day, rearranging its tempo. You think about who you'll see, what you'll wear, which gesture will mean everything and which will be ignored. A valet appears at the edge of the room, barefoot and nearly invisible. He approaches the bed with the delicacy of a man handling holy relics. Without a word, he checks the coals in the fireplace, adds a log, and exits. A ripple of motion follows. Others enter now. Silently. The room, though hushed, begins to breathe differently. Your golden cocoon of privacy is gently peeled back. Curtains open. Light filters in, not raw sunlight, but a filtered glow that flatters more than it illuminates. Still you do not move. They wait. It's understood that you will decide when the morning truly begins. One brave valet dares a whisper, "Majest." Your fingers twitch. It's enough. The ritual begins again. First, the petit lever. Select servants enter the inner chamber. A basin of rose-scented water is prepared. Towels warmed over a brazier. Your nightshirt is loosened with the ceremonial grace of a man diffusing a bomb made of lace. Outside the doors, more wait. Ministers, nobles, dignitaries. Each hoping for the honor of watching you stretch. To be present at the first breath of the monarch's day is, somehow, as valuable as an audience itself. You sit up, finally. The room exhales. A brush is presented. Your hair is gently smoothed. The lace at your collar is adjusted. The robe, embroidered silk, because flannel is for farmers, is laid across your shoulders. Someone clears their throat. The physician. Of course. He asks about your dreams. You say nothing. He nods, as if that's the answer he wanted. Historians still debate whether the king's mornings were more religious than regal. The repeated gestures. The sacred quiet. The reverent gazes. There's a rhythm to it, a liturgy of monarchy. And like all good rituals, it reinforces not just belief, but identity. Now come the nobles. The grand lever. The door opens, and the chamber floods with bodies. Not in a rush, rushing is vulgar, but in a cascade of order, ministers of state, bishops, artists, men of influence and men pretending. Each bows. Each steps to the side. The hierarchy is visible in every motion, like a flock of birds circling a single, silent hawk. You stand. And again, the world adjusts. A valet hands you a small mirror. You glance, not to check yourself, but to remind yourself. Yes, still divine. Outside, the bells ring. Not for mass. Not for news. For you. The Sun King has risen. And Versailles begins to orbit again. The day officially begins, not with an announcement, but with your footsteps. You exit your chamber, wrapped in brocade and significance, and the palace awakens more fully around you. Tapestries seem brighter, chandeliers gleam harder, and courtiers adjust their smiles like instruments tuning to your presence. This morning's destination, the Hall of Ambassadors. It's not a long walk, but that's irrelevant. At Versailles, every corridor is a runway, and every pause is a monologue. Servants fall in behind you like a procession, each knowing their place and purpose, or at least faking it convincingly. You're stopped only once, by a young page who kneels, offering a folded note. The handwriting is familiar. You pocket it without a word. The boy will remember this forever. You may not remember the boy. Inside the Hall of Ambassadors, the air is thick with anticipation. This morning, you're meeting a delegation from the Ottoman Empire. Their garments are vibrant, their expressions unreadable. They bow with a grace that matches your grandeur. The translator steps forward. You raise a hand. Let them speak, you say. You want to hear the cadence of their language, the rhythm, the music. You don't need to understand every word. You understand tone, posture, power. Their leader offers a gift, a golden astrolabe, intricately worked, studded with turquoise. You admire it for a moment, then gesture to your steward. Place it beside the Persian chessboard. A message, unspoken, you are one of many. Welcome to the collection. They ask questions about your court, your plans, your gardens. You answer sparingly. Each response is a riddle wrapped in velvet. At one point, you smile without showing teeth. The delegation murmurs among themselves, unsure whether they've just been complimented or dismissed. Historians will write about this meeting for years. Some will say it was a turning point in East-West relations. Others will note the embroidery on your cuffs. You prefer the second version. It lasts longer in paintings. The audience ends with mutual bows and gifts exchanged. As they leave, one of them turns to look back at you. Not out of rudeness, but curiosity. You hold his gaze, just long enough to remind him that kings may end conversations, but emperors end silence. You leave the hall. Another council awaits. Then fencing practice. Then a poet's recital, which you've half promised to attend and fully intend to sleep through. But first, another change of clothes. You return briefly to your wardrobe gallery. The day's next ensemble is lighter, ivory and silver, with lace at the cuffs wide enough to be mistaken for wings. You are redressed with the usual reverence, each layer a statement, each button a reminder that even fastening requires witnesses. And then, it's time to be seen. The public promenade. You step out into the marble courtyard, where the people wait, peasants, merchants, hopefuls. Not close enough to touch, of course, but close enough to gasp. They cheer. Some weep. One woman faints artistically. It's not a performance. It's pilgrimage. You wave. Not wildly. That would be gauche. Just a smooth motion of the wrist, slow enough to allow painters to remember it accurately. You pause to acknowledge a child lifted on a father's shoulders. The child waves a crude flower crown. You allow a flicker of warmth into your expression. That single flicker becomes a legend in 5 provinces by nightfall. Historians often debate these moments. Were they genuine affection? or carefully measured theatrics? As always, both. You retreat inside, not because you're tired, but because time has moved, and you must move with it. Back in the salons, a fencing instructor waits. Not to teach you, you've already mastered every form of mastery, but to be bested by you in front of his students. You take the foil, adjust your stance, and smile. Let's remind them who we are, you say. And with that, you lunge, precise, graceful, inevitable. As always. The foil glints in your hand like a sliver of lightning caught mid-strike. You barely glance at it before raising your arm, assuming your stance. The fencing salon is silent, thick with anticipation. Footmen line the walls, pretending to look disinterested. Pages peek in through the doorway, holding their breath. Across from you stands the fencing master, a man of skill, yes, but also discretion. He knows his role isn't to defeat you. It's to look like he's trying to, without succeeding. That delicate balance between choreography and humiliation is an art form in itself. You nod once. The bout begins. You advance, not in a rush, but like a storm cloud inching across the sky. He parries. You counter. The steel rings out, clean, sharp, elegant. Every movement you make is polished with intention. This is not merely sport. It's ballet with consequences. The fencing master lunges. You sidestep with a smooth pivot and tap his shoulder with the tip of your blade. Point. There's no applause, only a hushed ripple of appreciation, like a collective inhale. One of the younger nobles watching murmurs something about divine reflexes. You hear it. You file the compliment away for later use. The match continues. You allow him one near touch, just to make it interesting. The courtiers exchange glances. Did you see that? He almost got him. But of course, he didn't. He never would. You finish it with a feint and a final strike to the chest, symbolic, precise, poetic. Point. Match. You lower your blade, remove your glove, and offer a courteous nod. The instructor bows deeply, sweat trickling down his temple like it's been granted permission to exist. You hand your foil to a valet, who immediately disappears with it like it's radioactive royalty. Have it rewrapped, you say softly. Tighter grip. Yes, majestic. As you leave the fencing salon, you feel more invigorated than fatigued. It's a ritual you cherish, not for the exercise, but for the reminder you are still sharp. Still in control. Still the axis upon which this palace rotates. Back in your private quarters, a light refreshment awaits. Orange slices. Mint water. Small cakes shaped like suns, because even your pastries have branding. A note lies on your writing desk. Folded, sealed, perfumed. You recognize the handwriting. You open it slowly. Carefully. The words inside are flattering, flirtatious, and framed in just enough ambiguity to avoid scandal. You smile faintly. Then place it in the drawer with others, a private archive of admiration. Outside, bells chime the hour. Time for the poetry reading. You sigh, but only slightly. The salon is already prepared. Cushions arranged. Candles lit. A poet stands by the fireplace, shuffling pages with the trembling reverence of a man about to propose to a volcano. You take your seat. He begins. The verses are fine. Lush language, too many metaphors, the occasional clever turn of phrase. He compares your reign to the arc of the sun across silk. You raise an eyebrow. He stumbles on the next line. Every eye in the room is watching you watch him. You allow a small nod after the final stanza. Just enough to bless the moment. The poet exhales like he's just survived a duel. A page takes the manuscript to be reviewed, though it will likely end up in the Royal Library, untouched and beautifully bound. You rise. Have someone turn that into a cantata, you say. Yes, sire. And then, as quietly as you arrived, you leave. Because the opera waits. Tonight's performance is Les Amants du Soleil, a romantic tragedy written specifically for your court. The lead role, obviously, is modeled after you. Or, more accurately, after an idea of you. One that involves a lot of gold lame and declarations of eternal sovereignty whispered beneath moonlight. You enter the royal box. The audience rises. You sit. They sit. The opera begins. Music swells. Voices climb. The chandeliers shimmer like they're trying to match the emotional pitch. You watch with interest, though your attention occasionally wanders to the faces below, to the curve of a violin bow, to the quiet thrill of knowing the room bends itself around your enjoyment. At one point, the soprano hits a note so high and clear it seems to slice through the ceiling. You allow yourself to smile. The composer will dine well for a month. Historians love to speculate about your taste in music. Baroque, certainly. Grand, naturally. But there's nuance in your preferences. You enjoy drama, not just on the stage, but in harmony. Conflict resolved through melody. Power expressed in tempo. The opera ends. The applause is thunderous. Not just for the performers, but for your presence. As you leave the box, courtiers part like a tide. One of them whispers, "Magnificent, as always." You don't respond. You don't need to. Your silhouette against the corridor light is enough to close the curtain on the night. The day is drawing to a close again. And Versailles, ever watchful, prepares for your descent once more. The halls of Versailles are glowing again, this time with candlelight instead of sunlight. The transition is seamless, almost invisible, like magic performed by hundreds of invisible hands. But it isn't magic. It's management. Dozens of servants, timed to your rhythm. The palace responds not to clocks, but to you. You walk back toward your chambers. Slowly. Not from fatigue, but because endings must be savored. The opera still echoes in your thoughts, the harmonies, the metaphors, the singer whose voice cracked slightly in the second act. You noticed. You always do. You won't mention it. Not tonight. But she'll feel it. Absence can be louder than critique. You pass through the hall of mirrors again. At night, it's different. The mirrors no longer reflect sunlight, they reflect you alone. Your candlelit form multiplied endlessly, a procession of kings trailing behind you. There's something beautiful about it. And something a little sad. You pause. Not long. Just enough to catch your own eye. To acknowledge yourself. The performer. The monarch. The myth. And then, forward again. In your private gallery, the final salon of the evening has gathered. Not official, not on the record, just those close enough to matter, clever enough to stay, elegant enough to not embarrass themselves after midnight. There's laughter. Low. Sophisticated. The kind that drips more from posture than punchlines. A marquise recounts a scandal involving an orange, a valet, and a misinterpreted curtsy. You chuckle. Not because it's funny, but because she told it well. Wit deserves reward. Even when it's nonsense. A duke brings up philosophy. Something about Descartes and the illusion of self. You nod, then say softly, "There's nothing more real than being watched." He won't sleep tonight, trying to decide whether that was profound or terrifying. A harp is being played in the corner. You didn't ask for music. But it's there. Appropriate. Soft. It makes everything feel cinematic. Someone offers you a drink, herbal, this time. chamomile with a hint of honey. You sip once, then set it down. Too much sweetness before sleep is dangerous. Makes dreams sticky. Your dog curls up at your feet again. Same as last night. Same as always. Animals aren't fooled by titles, but they respect patterns. You've given them plenty. You rise, eventually, and signal the end of the evening. The group stands, bows, murmurs. A few linger by the doorway, hoping to be the last thing you see tonight. You pretend not to notice. You see them all. Back in your bedchamber, the routine restarts. Robe removed. Face gently cleansed with rose water. Hands dabbed with lotion scented faintly of pine and lavender. The nightshirt again, fresh, crisp, unchanged in design since your youth. You don't like change at night. Day is for performance. Night is for rhythm. The valet fluffs your pillow with the precision of a man carving marble. Someone asks if you require anything else. You shake your head. The curtains are drawn. You lie back. Not immediately. You settle slowly. Like a ship docking after a voyage. The bed accepts your weight with silence. The sheets cool against your skin. Outside, the wind taps lightly at the glass, as if asking permission to pass by. The last candle is extinguished. Darkness. But not absence. The palace is still here. Breathing. Waiting. You close your eyes. You think, briefly, of all that happened today, the visits, glances, silk, applause. You remember the weight of the sword during fencing. The flicker of doubt in the English ambassador's eye. The note you received. The reflection you caught in the mirror. And then, as always, you let it all fade. Because tomorrow, it begins again. The robe. The bowing. The brocade. The decisions. The wine. The performances. The sun must rise. And you must rise with it. Or rather, it must rise because of you. Night deepens over Versailles. Outside, the moon has taken full command of the sky, casting silver nets over the gardens and fountains. The palace, though blanketed in quiet, hums with the latent energy of something alive. It doesn't sleep, it waits. Just like everyone else. Inside your bedchamber, the velvet curtains around your bed hold fast against the dark. Heavy. Soundless. They protect more than they hide. Within, you lie motionless, body stilled but mind not yet surrendered. The breathing of your dog at your feet is rhythmic, grounding. One of the few things around you that isn't calculating its next move. Beyond the curtains, a servant coughs once, quietly, apologetically. Even his involuntary reflexes are disciplined. You appreciate that. You don't need noise. You have enough of that during the day. And so you lie there, alone with your thoughts. They are quieter now, worn down by repetition. But they still march, like your armies, relentless and loyal. You think, briefly, about tomorrow's council. About the repairs on the Grand Trianon roof. About whether the chef will dare attempt the almond souffle again. You think about your son. The Dauphin is growing older. Eager. Restless. He watches you with a hunger you remember in yourself, long before mirrors, long before crowns. You wonder if he'll ever understand what it takes to carry a kingdom on your spine without showing the weight. Then, unexpectedly, you remember the first time you wore the crown. It was too large. Not metaphorically, literally. It slid down your forehead during the coronation rehearsal. Everyone laughed, except your tutor, who simply whispered, "Grow into it." You did. You grew into everything. Into the crown. Into the court. Into the golden halls and ceremonial gestures and the thousand unspoken rules that turned a child into a god. You remember the early days, the fear, the uncertainty, the hunger to be more than ceremonial. You remember realizing that presence was power. That to be seen was to be believed. That repetition was reputation. Historians will say you ruled with ego. And they will be right. But they will miss that your ego was armor. You forged it in public and polished it in private. The curtain shifts slightly as a breeze seeps in through the high windows. You catch the scent of night air mixed with the faint memory of perfume. Not yours. Someone who stood too close earlier in the day. It lingers. You don't mind. Tomorrow, there will be another breakfast, another robe, another war disguised as conversation. There will be treaties and toasts, whispers in galleries, tears on handkerchiefs, and laughter at your carefully timed comments. You will move through it all like choreography. Like you always do. But for now, you are still. This is the one part of the day that belongs to you. Not the version they paint. Not the figure embroidered into tapestries or immortalized in bronze. Just you. Louis. A man who has not truly been alone since childhood. A king who built a palace not to escape people, but to control how they approached him. A performer who never forgot the applause of his first audience. You breathe deeply. One hand resting on your chest, the other by your side, open. Inhale. Exhale. Your heartbeat is steady. Regal. The curtains do not move again. The candle has long since died. And the palace, sensing your descent into sleep, finally eases its breath. Outside, the stars look down. Not with judgment, but with recognition. They, too, know what it means to burn so that others can look up. Dawn is still far away, but the palace is already preparing for it. Somewhere deep within Versailles, ovens are being lit. Coals stirred, kettles filled. Boots are polished in silence. Garden paths are swept under moonlight, just in case you decide to step out early. Because no one truly knows when you'll rise, they only know they must be ready when you do. In your chambers, everything is still. Your breath is soft now, almost imperceptible beneath the rhythm of the room. One servant listens carefully, ear trained to the silence like a court musician to a single note. Another dozes quietly in a corner, allowed only the kind of sleep that can be shaken off in a heartbeat. You dream. Not of wars or treaties. Not of periwigs or perfumed letters or flaming soufflés. You dream of a field. A wide one. Open. Quiet. The grass is long, but not unruly. The wind bends it in unison, like courtiers bowing in waves. There are no walls. No velvet. No gold. You are not wearing anything royal. You are simply there. Alone. And oddly, at peace. This place does not exist, of course. You've never seen it. Not once. Not as a boy. Not in all your hunts or carriage rides or manufactured rustic excursions. But your mind makes it vividly, perhaps because it longs to. It builds it from fragments, stories, stolen moments of stillness, one painting of Arcadia you once passed and didn't stop to admire but never forgot. Your dream lingers there, letting you exist without consequence, without ritual. Just breath and earth and silence. And yet even in this dream, the sun does not rise without your permission. When the first light does break through the eastern curtains of your real bedroom, the palace knows. Instinctively. Someone lights a lamp. Another fetches the morning towel. A third checks the temperature of the wash basin, as if the water might judge them back. The valet steps inside your room. The dog lifts its head. You stir. Not with a start, but with a shift. The kind of movement that signals transition, not surprise. You open your eyes. And with that, the dream fades. The field is gone. The silence evaporates. The grass bends for someone else now. You are not just awake, you are aware. The room brightens incrementally. Curtains are drawn back. The light touches the gilded mirror first, then the edge of the bed. A warm hue spreads across your linens. Everything begins to glow. You sit up slowly. And just like that, the kingdom aligns itself. Historians will write of this day. Perhaps they will mark a treaty signed, or a new ballet premiered. Perhaps they will trace the lineage of a decision you make before lunch, a glance you give in passing, a sentence spoken in jest that ripples for decades. They will study your rules. They will measure your reign. But they will never fully know what it costs to wake up as the Sun King. To rise into a world so tailored to your presence, and yet feel its weight pressed down from the moment your eyes open. Still, you rise. You always do. And the mirrors begin their work again. The palace pulses with anticipation. Another day has begun, but not just any day, a Louis day. The kind that will be marked by tapestries, remembered by diplomats, and gossiped about across gilded dinner tables. You haven't even stood yet, and already your name is on everyone's lips like a benediction or a warning. You stretch. Not the way commoners do, with joints cracking and sleepy groans, but like marble shifting into place. Your body remembers the script. So does your staff. The lever begins again. They enter in sequence. First, the inner circle. Valets, doctors, the bishop who blesses you with words so rehearsed even angels might roll their eyes. He says them anyway. Just in case today is the day the divine decides to listen. Your nightshirt is removed, replaced with a mourning robe. Silk, naturally. The color chosen by your personal astrologer, who's convinced that midnight blue will neutralize Venetian aggression. You don't believe him, but the fabric flatters your eyes. So, close enough. Outside your chamber, the grand lever is forming. Nobles line up, adjusting their wigs and their wit. Each one hoping for a nod, a phrase, even a glance. A man once received a dukedom because you asked him to pass the butter. The doors open. You step forward. Eyes widen. Fans flutter. One woman's knees give slightly. Whether from admiration or poor corsetry, you'll never know. But it's flattering either way. A cardinal presents an update from Rome. A minister mutters something about taxation in Burgundy. You acknowledge both with equal gravity and unequal interest. One will be forgotten by lunch. The other will turn into a war. You make your way to the petit déjeuner, which has been rehearsed like a stage play. A golden tray. Fruit so perfectly sliced it seems unnatural. A croissant with the precise flake-to-butter ratio. And of course, the morning chocolate, dark, thick, aristocratic. You sip. Outside, the gardens begin to hum. Not with bees, those have been relocated to a more photogenic section, but with gardeners, musicians, petitioners, dancers. All orchestrated, all eager to exist in the orbit of your morning. You nod toward a page. Have the dancers rehearse closer to the fountain today, you say. The spray will catch the sunlight better. Yes, majestic. He runs as if the instruction itself were a verse from the Psalms. And now, the parade of choices. What to wear? Who to punish? Which room to appear in next? Do you walk the hall of battles or the salon of war? Do you dine with poets or generals? Do you look kindly upon the architect, or remind him that marble is not an emotion? This is the rhythm of your life. Choice, ceremony, consequence. You move through the morning with elegance and iron. A painting is unveiled. A child is baptized. a decision is made about whether green or crimson will define the royal napkins for next Thursday's feast. Every act, a ripple. Every step, a message. Historians will study your edicts. Philosophers will dissect your symbolism. Revolutionaries will dream of your downfall. But for now, you are untouchable. You walk through Versailles not like a man, but like a season. You arrive. You dominate. You recede. And everyone else must adjust accordingly. Later today, you'll speak with an astronomer. He'll tell you about constellations, about light taking centuries to arrive. He'll try to explain that some stars are already dead by the time we see them. You'll listen. And then you'll smile and say, "That won't happen to me." Because you're not a star in the sky. You're the sun on earth. And today, like every day, you rise. Now, as the curtain gently falls on this day in Versailles, let your breath slow. The palace, grand and golden, begins to quiet again. The halls no longer echo with steps, but sigh with stillness. Candles flicker lower. The moonlight returns to the marble floors like a soft tide. And you, our king, our center, retreat once more to your resting place. The weight of brocade is gone. The crown, for now, set down. What remains is stillness. Safety. A sense of something larger being held in calm. Let your body relax beneath linen and time. The mirrors no longer reflect motion, only peace. The fountains sleep. The garden paths are empty. Everything waits for tomorrow, but not impatiently. You are wrapped in a world built to honor you, and now, it honors your rest. So close your eyes. Let the flicker of chandeliers fade. Let the velvet hush of your chamber hold you. And as the world outside turns gently on, know this. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. You are the light that rises, and the warmth that lingers. Sleep now, in your golden bed. Versailles is still. And the sun will rise again, when you do.